Beneath the heavy gray sky, the snow fell silently, each flake drifting down like a fragile whisper upon the frozen earth. The landscape stretched wide and empty, broken only by the skeletal arms of leafless trees that clawed at the cold air. It was a quiet kind of stillness, the kind that holds its breath as if waiting for a secret to unfold. There, in the heart of this frozen world, stood a woman tethered to a rough-hewn tree, her body trembling beneath a threadbare coat that barely kept the chill from biting deep into her skin. The ropes bit into her wrists, coarse and unforgiving, binding her not only in flesh but in the weight of years, years of silence, of invisible wounds. Her eyes, dark and steady despite the sharp ache behind them, looked beyond the bleak winter, past the relentless cold that seeped into her bones. There was no plea in her gaze, no spark of desperation, only a quiet, stubborn ember that refused to die. Around her, the air was thick with a silence heavier than snow, a silence shaped by the rigid forms of two figures standing nearby. Her parents, faces etched with the hard lines of weariness and fear, watched with cold eyes that had forgotten how to soften. Their hands clenched and unclenched, their breaths shallow and uneven, as though the very act of punishing her drained them as well. The woman's father was a man carved from the unforgiving frontier, his jaw set with years of disappointment and the weight of expectations unmet. His mother's gaze flickered between sorrow and anger, a tempest of conflicting emotions behind her weathered face. Both bore the scars of their own battles, battles fought against a world that offered little mercy and fewer chances. In their eyes, the woman was not a daughter but a stubborn failure, a shadow of hope diminished beneath the crushing burden of their harsh laws. She stood silent, her body aching from bruises hidden beneath her coat, her mind retreating to a place beyond the reach of cold hands and colder hearts. The snow swirled gently around her feet, blanketing the earth in white, a mute witness to the harshness of human judgment. The trees whispered softly in the wind, their bare branches trembling like fragile fingers reaching toward a forgotten sky. The winter did not rush, it did not scold or demand. It simply held its stillness, as if waiting for something that would not yet come. No neighbors had come to intervene. The small town nearby knew of her plight but spoke only in hushed tones, their eyes lowered, unwilling or unable to cross the invisible line drawn by fear and tradition. Whispers slipped through the cold streets, stories passed from one shadowed doorway to another, but none dared to break the silence that wrapped around the woman like a shroud. In this place, where the wind cut sharper than a knife and hope was a scarce commodity, she was left alone to endure. The woman's mind drifted to the distant memories of gentler days, days when a laugh could still break through the heaviness, when the sun had not yet forgotten how to warm her skin. Those memories flickered like fragile flames in the deep winter of her soul, barely enough to keep the cold at bay. But even in the depths of her solitude, there was a thread of something unyielding, a quiet promise that this was not the end. Far beyond the edge of the forest, a faint glow stirred against the horizon. It was a light soft and persistent, like the first breath of dawn after a long night. The woman's eyes caught the subtle shimmer, a whisper of warmth against the endless white. She did not know yet what it meant, but her heart stirred, a fragile hope taking root beneath the frost. Then, through the hush of the snowfall, the distant sound of hooves echoed faintly, steady, measured, a rhythm that cut through the stillness like a heartbeat. A lone rider approached, his figure blurred by swirling snow, moving steadily toward the broken shape tied to the tree. His eyes held a quiet resolve, tempered by years spent among the harsh lands. He saw not just a girl punished and forgotten but something more, a fragile spark of life refusing to yield to the cold. The man slowed his horse as he drew near, careful and deliberate, as if entering a sacred space. He dismounted with practiced ease, boots sinking softly into the snow. There was no rush in his movements, no loud declarations of rescue. Instead, he offered a presence, steady, calm, and unassuming, like a warm hearth glowing faintly in a lonely cabin. The woman looked up, surprised to meet eyes that held neither judgment nor pity but something steadier, gentler. Her parents shifted uneasily, the weight of their decision suddenly feeling heavier beneath the silent scrutiny of the stranger. The father's jaw tightened, his anger flickering with uncertainty. The mother's eyes betrayed a hint of fear, fear of losing control, fear of what might come if this strange man intervened. But the rancher did not speak harsh words or threaten. He simply knelt beside her, fingers deft and careful as they untied the rough knots that had bound her so long. The ropes fell away like chains breaking free from forgotten prisons, and she rubbed her wrists, savoring the strange new lightness. The cold still clung to her, but the absence of the bonds was a beginning, a first breath of freedom. Without a word, the man offered a hand, steady and sure, an unspoken invitation to rise and walk away from the past. Together, they stepped forward, their footprints marking a tentative path through the snow. The wind whispered around them, carrying away the echoes of pain and leaving behind a fragile hope. The woman's heart beat with a cautious rhythm, a slow and steady pulse that spoke of survival, of resilience born not from strength alone but from the quiet courage to keep moving forward. Behind them, the tree stood bare and silent, a witness to a punishment that would not define her. The sky above began to lighten, the faint promise of dawn breaking through the winter's cold grasp. And though the road ahead was uncertain and the scars remained, there was something undeniable now, a flicker of warmth amid the frost, a story waiting to be told beyond the silence. The snow continued to fall softly, weaving a delicate tapestry of white across the land, as two figures moved slowly toward a new beginning, one step, one breath at a time. The snow had softened the harsh edges of the world, blanketing the land in quiet white that seemed to swallow every sound but the crunch of footsteps and the steady rasp of winter wind. The man led her carefully through the forest, where trees stood like sentinels, their branches heavy with snow, bending but unbroken. Each breath between them floated in the cold air like a ghost, fragile and fleeting. The woman's body, though freed from the ropes, still trembled, not from the cold alone but from the echo of long years bound by fear and silence. The man's presence was steady and unassuming, like the steady drip of water wearing away stone, slow but sure, patient beyond words. He said little, his voice deep and soft when he finally spoke, a sound meant not to command but to soothe. There was no rush in his tone, no demand for explanations. He offered instead a quiet invitation to trust, a sanctuary within the vast emptiness of the snow-covered wilderness. She listened, her guarded heart caught between wariness and a tentative flicker of hope. His hands were steady as he helped her walk, careful not to jostle the bruises hidden beneath her worn coat. His eyes, dark and calm, held no judgment. In them, she glimpsed something she had not seen in years, a reflection not of shame or blame, but of quiet respect. The man was no stranger to hardship himself, his lined face and strong hands telling of seasons spent taming wild lands, wrestling stubborn earth to life. He was a man of few words and many silences, the kind who spoke in acts rather than promises. As they moved through the snow, the woman's thoughts drifted back to the house she had left behind, the cold walls that had held her prisoner, the sharp voices that had bruised her spirit more deeply than any hand. The memory was a frostbite that lingered beneath the surface, a wound slow to heal. Yet here, with the man beside her, the ice seemed to crack just enough to let a faint warmth through. Not a blaze, no sudden fire, just a slow-burning ember that might, with time, kindle into something steady and strong. They came upon a small ranch house, nestled among pines dusted in white, smoke curling from the chimney like a promise of warmth. The house was modest, weathered wood and sturdy stone, but it stood like a beacon in the stark landscape, a refuge against the relentless winter. The man opened the door with a worn hand, inviting her inside without a word, as if the quiet understanding between them needed no explanation. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of pine and burning wood, the kind of warmth that seeped into bones long chilled by the cold. The woman shivered, not from the chill now, but from the strange sensation of safety, an unfamiliar guest in her heart. The man moved with a practiced ease, lighting a fire that crackled and popped, casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn walls. He handed her a blanket, soft and heavy, and she wrapped it around herself like a shield against the world outside. There was no ceremony, no grand declarations of salvation, only a slow unfolding of care in small gestures. A shared cup of thick coffee, the quiet turning of pages in a battered book, the way the man's eyes occasionally met hers with a patient steadiness that said, "You are not alone here." The woman let down her guard, brick by brick, the walls she had built to survive beginning to crumble beneath the weight of quiet kindness. The days passed like gentle waves, each one washing a little more of the cold from her soul. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of wind through the cracks in the window, the soft murmur of animals settling in for the night. The man did not rush her or expect too much, he waited in the spaces between, allowing trust to grow in its own time. His presence was a balm, steady and sure, a tether to something solid in a world that had too often been fragile and cruel. Word of the woman's arrival drifted through the nearby settlement like a faint breeze, stirring curiosity and whispers. Some watched with suspicion, others with quiet sympathy. The ranch hands, rugged and reserved, offered nods of acknowledgement, small tokens of acceptance in a place where words were often scarce and action spoke loudest. The community's gaze was a complicated thing, layered with old prejudices and new possibilities. Yet beneath it all, the woman felt the first tentative threads of belonging weaving themselves around her. But the shadow of her past still lingered. Her parents' anger had not thawed with the snow. Messages came, sharp, bitter words carried on the wind like frozen arrows. They demanded her return, a return to punishment and silence. The man stood beside her through it all, his quiet strength a shield against the storm. He never spoke of confrontation but simply remained, a steady presence anchoring her when the world threatened to unravel. In the stillness of long winter nights, they would sit by the fire, the woman tracing the worn lines of the wooden table, lost in thought. The man's steady breathing was a reminder that not all battles were fought with weapons, some were waged in the quiet corners of the heart, where courage was measured not by shouts but by the strength to simply endure. And slowly, beneath the heavy weight of snow and silence, something began to bloom. Not a sudden flower, but a slow, deliberate growth, a quiet strength born from shared kindness, from the gentle understanding that healing was not a race but a journey walked together. The woman found in the rancher's steady gaze not rescue but recognition, a mirror reflecting her bravery rather than her brokenness. The snow continued to fall beyond the window, soft and relentless, but inside the small house, the cold receded. In its place grew the fragile warmth of hope, a light steady enough to hold against the dark. And as the world outside lay wrapped in white silence, two souls, once strangers, began the delicate work of weaving trust from the threads of a long-frozen winter. The road ahead remained uncertain, the scars yet to fully fade. But here, in this quiet sanctuary carved from snow and kindness, the woman took her first steps toward a life no longer defined by chains, visible or invisible, and toward a future where warmth was no longer just a distant glow on the horizon but a presence breathed deep within. Winter's grip lingered, though softened by the steady pulse of days passing, each marked not by grand events but by small, unfolding moments, breaths held and released, hands extended and accepted, silences shared and filled. The woman moved through the rhythms of the ranch with cautious steps, her fingers tracing the rough wood of fences and tools as if seeking connection in their solidity. The bruises beneath her skin slowly faded, but it was the deeper wounds, the ones etched into the folds of her heart, that demanded a slower healing. The man watched without insistence, never pushing, never rushing the fragile unfolding of trust. In the quiet mornings, when frost clung to the window panes and the world outside held its breath beneath a blanket of snow, their eyes would meet briefly over the steaming cups of coffee. No words were needed in those moments, just the unspoken acknowledgement that she was no longer alone in the vast silence. The rancher's presence was a constant, a soft light steady enough to guide her through the shadows of memory. She learned the cadence of the land, the creak of a door settling, the whisper of wind threading through bare branches, the distant lowing of cattle stirring beneath thick blankets of straw. Each sound became a thread weaving her into the fabric of a life she had never dared imagine. She tended to the animals with tentative hands, her touch gentle, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had begun to take root inside her. Yet, beneath the surface, the past lingered like a restless ghost. Letters arrived, words sharpened by anger and old fears, demanding she return, threatening to unravel the fragile sanctuary she had found. Her parents' voices echoed in her mind, harsh and unyielding, reminders of chains not yet broken. The woman felt the pull of those voices, a tug toward the familiar pain, even as she fought to hold on to the quiet strength growing within. The rancher stood by her side, not with grand declarations but with steadfast calm. When the letters came, he folded them carefully and laid them aside, offering no solutions but the strength of his steady presence. In the evenings, by the fire's glow, he shared stories not of battles won or lost but of the land's enduring patience, of seasons turning in their own time. His words were soft but firm, teaching her that healing, like the earth itself, must be gentle, persistent, and respectful. Neighbors and ranch hands began to take notice, their cautious glances turning toward nods of quiet respect. They spoke in low voices, their judgment softened by the woman's growing resilience. Some offered a nod in passing, others a brief smile, small gestures but powerful tokens of acceptance in a place where walls were often higher than words. The community's gaze, once cold and distant, started to soften, the edges blurring beneath the weight of unspoken understanding. The woman's heart, once tightly clenched by fear and sorrow, began to open in small increments. She spoke less of the past, more of the present, the subtle shifts of light in a snow-laden tree, the warmth of a sunbeam on frost, the quiet company of a hand held without demand. The rancher's affection was not loud or sudden, it was a slow, steady bloom, growing in the spaces between words and silences, a gentle assurance that she was seen and valued beyond her scars. One evening, as the wind howled softly beyond the cabin walls, the woman found herself sharing a memory she had long buried, a laugh stolen in childhood, a moment of sunlight before shadows fell. The rancher listened without interruption, his eyes reflecting the firelight and something deeper, an understanding born not of pity but of kinship. In that sharing, the woman felt a weight lift, a delicate thread of connection weaving a new tapestry of hope. Still, the journey was far from over. The past was never far behind, a shadow stretching long beneath the snow. But the woman no longer faced it alone. With each day, her voice grew steadier, her steps surer. She reclaimed not only her body but her story, writing new chapters in the quiet strength born of survival and the gentle courage to trust again. As the section closes, the rancher and the woman stand side by side, gazing out over the frost-kissed land, a landscape both harsh and beautiful, much like the journey they have shared. The snow continues to fall softly, each flake a silent witness to the slow but undeniable bloom of a strength that will carry her forward, even as the coming days promise new challenges and the stirring of old fears. In this unfolding tale, the true victory is not in grand gestures or loud declarations but in the quiet resilience of two souls finding warmth in the cold, trust in the silence, and love in the slow bloom of understanding. The story moves onward, gently pulling the reader toward a climax where courage will be tested, hearts will be laid bare, and the fragile promise of a new beginning will face the reckoning of the past. The horizon was a pale wash of gray, the snow drifting gently as if the world itself held its breath. Inside the small cabin, the fire's amber glow flickered across worn faces, too intertwined by time and shared trials, yet shadowed by a past that refused to stay buried. The woman stood by the window, her breath misting the glass as her gaze stretched out over the frozen land, a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. The calm she had nurtured was fragile, poised on the edge of something inevitable. A sudden sound fractured the quiet, the sharp clip of boots crunching on packed snow. The door burst open, and with it came a storm of cold and anger. Her parents stood there, eyes blazing with a fury sharpened by years of pain and pride, their figures rigid with authority long wielded without question. Their voices, rough and demanding, filled the room like a gale, tearing through the fragile peace. They came not as supplicants but as commanders, insisting she return, to submit once more to the chains of their making. The woman's heart hammered, the old fears rising like bitter wind, but she did not move back. She turned slowly, meeting their gaze with a steadiness born of all the quiet battles fought and won. The rancher stepped beside her, a silent pillar of strength, his presence a shield that held the storm at bay. There was no shout, no fury in his voice, only calm, an unyielding stillness that spoke louder than any words could. The confrontation unfolded not with violence but with the weight of unspoken truths. The woman spoke softly, her voice clear and steady, each word a step away from the shadow of her past. She told them of the warmth she had found, not in their harsh discipline but in the quiet kindness of another's steadiness. Of the strength that grew not from chains but from freedom. Her parents' faces faltered, the rigid masks cracking beneath the weight of a love they had not known how to give. The rancher watched without interruption, his eyes reflecting a quiet pride, not just for the woman before him but for the journey that had brought them here. In that room, under the soft glow of firelight and the pale winter sky, the past and present collided, pain meeting courage, fear meeting hope. The parents, once unyielding, softened, their anger giving way to a fragile understanding. As the night deepened, the storm outside softened to a gentle whisper. The woman stepped forward, not in submission but in invitation, to a new beginning written not by past cruelty but by shared strength. The rancher reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in a promise unspoken but deeply felt. The cabin, once a refuge from the cold, now held the warmth of belonging and the quiet thrill of a future yet to be shaped. Beyond the window, snowflakes danced softly, each one a silent witness to the tender resolution blossoming within. The woman's gaze lifted to the horizon, where the first faint blush of dawn promised renewal. The journey had been long, marked by shadows and silence, but here, in the gentle clasp of hands and the steady beat of hearts, a story found its satisfying close. And yet, as all true stories do, it left the door open, to hope, to growth, to the endless unfolding of life's quiet miracles. For in the wild, harsh beauty of the West, where winters bite and summers blaze, it is the strength found in kindness and the courage born of love that endure. The fire burned low, the night held its peace, and two souls, bound by trials and tenderness, stepped forward into the soft light of a new day.